Hey, let's try that again. How's that? Does that work? I always do this. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns Hour, half hour, whatever you want to call it. I always do this. It's so funny getting this like up and running in the morning. And one of these days I'll actually get it right. But let's start again. I hope you got your taxes done on time. I hope you're not in trouble with the IRS and all of it. We've got a lot to talk about because there's just a tremendous amount of crazy stuff happening at a level that is almost frightening. And so let's go over it all, because there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of really weird things happening. But let's go back to what I talked about over the weekend, in both of my live streams over the weekend and the articles that I wrote over at goldgoatsandguns.com. You can follow me there. You can follow my Patreon, like what you hear. You can support there. Patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns is a link to the website. Usually a link at the bottom of each article. So we'll go from there. Now, the main thing I want to bring up, and I want to dispel to the people that are still hanging on to hope, there is no consensus in the Trump administration. The article I wrote that just hit Zero Hedge this morning, I wrote a couple days ago, on Monday actually, explaining that there's no that that Trump's cabinet is truly in charge in the White House and Trump is not. Okay. What I mean by that is the following. If you read the Washington Post article that I linked to, and the article that is the one down below in the liner notes about the neocons' real plan for Syria emerges out of the rubble, or lack of rubble. I open up with a discussion about the Washington Post article on Monday talking about Trump's cabinet. If you read the article carefully, it's obvious that Trump's cabinet, especially including Nikki Haley, are working overtime to convince him of the neocon perspective, of the rabidly pro-Israeli perspective on what to do vis-a-vis Syria, Iran, North Korea, China, Russia, the rest, all of it. Europe, all of it. It doesn't matter. And what's also was revealing about that article, and especially the way it was written as if Trump is this anomaly and doesn't get how Washington's supposed to work. It's obvious from the way the article was written that Trump came to Washington thinking that he's the president and he gets to tell people what to do, and then they go do it. Because that's the way you run your company when you're CEO. You listen to advice, but at the end of the day, you're the executive. You get to go, no, that's nice, but this is our plan. And what his advisors have done consistently, and what the GOPE and what the Democrats and everybody are trying to bind him into doing, using his personality defects and using his faults against him, is to put in front of him an array of options, which are all basically the same, and saying, look, we are the experts, we are in charge, and you get to choose between column A and column B. And if you don't choose between, and if you want column C, it's going to look like column A and column B plus 5% in your direction. And ultimately, they already know what they want, and then they just run the art of the deal on him. And it's pretty obvious that that's what's been going on in the foreign policy sense since August. Honestly, since last April. But in April, when he bombed al-Sharat last year, I honestly think that Trump wanted to appear tough. He wanted to be the big man on campus. He wanted to change the dialogue about how America conducts foreign policy. And so he went, the Cy Hirsch article that exposed all this last year made it abundantly clear that Mattis was trying to roll him back. Well, fast forward to this year, and now what we have a year's worth of things not getting any better. And the neocon's completely in charge of foreign policy, binding his hands on Russia, binding his hands on just about everything, except for China, because he and the deep state are pretty much in cahoots about China. And he's going to just continue to go off the rails. This is why he says one thing one day and then does something completely opposite the next day. This is why Larry Kudlow and Nikki Haley are arguing in the press. And she's completely off the rails, this one. But I've heard multiple reports of her when she was nominated, or when she was brought forth to Trump, she was interviewed by Trump for the job of U.S. ambassador, or like I like to say, embarrassment for the U.S. at the UN. She said, "Look, I will only take this job if I can say whatever the hell I want when I want. That I have to be off the leash. That you can just that I have carte blanche to do what I want." I've heard that from multiple people. I've heard that from multiple people enough to believe that it's true. And then if you review her actions as embarrassment to the UN, you'll realize that she is completely an independent actor. She works for AIPAC. And it's very obvious that she works for it. She has presidential ambitions. She's willing to go move against Trump in every way imaginable in order to push herself into a position to run for president either in 2020, if he doesn't make it that long, or 2024. That's what she's angling for. She will not stop until she's removed from her position. And she needs to be removed from her position because she's an embarrassment. And that brings me to what's going on in Syria and what's going on in North Korea and China and everything else. In the last couple of days, we've heard all sorts of stuff. Have had all sorts of things have broken wide open. The Chinese finally got off the fence and said, look, if you decertify the Iran deal, we're going to move in and help China develop their nuclear power program. The Russians have said, Israel, we have deferred not giving Syria modern air defense systems in deference to our relationship with you. That's off the table. We're going to give them S-300s. The Americans are trying to destroy their relationship with India after they've worked so hard to drive a wedge between India and China over the last 2 years by saying they want to scuttle, by trying to tell India they can't buy S-400 missile defense systems from Russia. Even though that's one of the few positive things that India's done under Narendra Modi for Central Asian stability. So it's obvious that nothing has changed at the White House, even though Trump is in charge, that the same policies are still in place. We're going to continue to drive a wedge between India and China. We're going to continue to resist at every level Central Asian integration. That's why we moved more troops into Afghanistan. That's why we've got 20 bases in Syria. It's why we attacked all of the Syrian air bases, ineffectually, I might add, on Friday night. Why the Israelis continue to attack the Syrian air bases over and over and over again, now actually risking their pilots' lives in order to achieve some measure of operational success, to ground the Syrian Air Force in order to, by proxy then, bleed Iran white. This is the part that no one is talking about. Pretty obvious to me. I don't know about you, but pretty obvious to me at this point that we know the war in Syria is pretty much won by Assad. Okay, there's no mystery here. Okay, I've read various reports from correspondents on the ground that there's still plenty of ISIS activity in Syria. ISIS could flare back up at any moment. Well, it's nice. Of course they can, because we've let so many of them get away, as opposed to bombing the freaking convoys on their way out of Raqqa. And so there's still work to be done. But the work that's getting done is everybody who's trying to, quote unquote, kill ISIS is fighting themselves at first. So I have been under the impression that now that Eastern Ghouta has been liberated, that the Syrian army would move down to Daraa. Not sure that that's going to happen. Read some things recently that changed my mind about that. Possible that they're going to go back up towards and get rid of resistance in Homs and Idlib first, well, in order to try and get the Israelis to stand down and to get them to calm down and to put off that confrontation for as long as possible. I think it's a good plan. I think it's a good idea. Because at this point, honestly, I have to say, the Israelis are doing everything imaginable to be great recruiters for the alt-right. Removing Assad from power is not in their best interest, but yet somehow they still think that it is, because they've been on this path. Certain elements within the Israeli government have been on this path for 40 or 50 years now. And it doesn't make, when you stop and look at what's going to happen after they remove Assad from power, who's going to take over? Nobody. Syria becomes this. Syria already is a mess. It's already a partitioned nightmare. There's at least 3 or 4 different actual leaders, governmental entities operating in Syria at this point. The Assad government, the area that the Assad government doesn't control, is either controlled by the Turks, the Kurds / the U.S., or Al Qaeda up in Idlib. It's a mess. While the Israelis give aid and comfort to ISIS down in Daraa. And it's only going to get worse from here. But the game plan going forward is that, like it or not, they don't have any moves. And I've been saying this for 2 years now. Since the moment that Putin moved in to Syria and exposed all of the mendacity, all of the lies, all of the duplicity, exposed all the people who are behind this operation to destroy Syria and move gas pipelines and everything else. I read a great article this morning kind of going over the ancient history on this from someone that I met on Steam. And if you guys aren't on Steemit, you should be. If you don't like censorship, then you should be on a censorship-proof, blockchain-based social media network. That's a different discussion for a different day. But the issues of the day in Syria are far more nuanced than the original plan for the Qataris to get a pipeline, and for the Saudis to get a pipeline, and everybody gets a pipeline except the Russians and the Iranians. And that was the original plan, but that was always just kind of the icing on the cake. The real icing on the cake was to destroy Syria, to undermine the stability of the Russian southern flank, and to keep Central Asia weak and surrounded by enemies, okay, and fighting amongst themselves. I mean, it's been that doctrine has not changed. I mean, it's the Brzezinski doctrine, who, by the way, on his deathbed said it's all been a failure and it was a mistake in the first place. So, but yet this is still on autopilot because this is the inertia of policy. This is the inertia of the bureaucracy. Okay, presidents change, but policies don't. And Donald Trump's not a strong enough person to stand up to that inertia. He's just not. And I don't blame the guy. I'm not upset about it. It is what it is. User 13 says, people are bringing up Yemen more and more on the socials. Do you think that Syria's hack is going to cause blowback on the Yemen policy? People are waking up too fast. Too fast for the elites. Well, they are. People are waking up way too fast for whatever the elites have in store for us. We can debunk in real time every one of their narratives. I said it in an article a couple of weeks ago, and I'll get to the Yemen part of that quote, that comment in just a minute. That while the people who are crafting these policies are very smart, and they may be the smartest people in the room, they're not smarter collectively than the room. When the room is 2 or 3 million people or 4 million people around the world digging through their lies, trying to figure them out because they just don't believe it. And that's not a particularly generous number. I firmly believe there are just millions of people around the world collectively in a weak neural network making each other smarter. I can tell you right now that one of the most valuable things I've ever done in my life was to start a subscription-based service where I gave my subscribers a private channel on Slack to sit around and talk. And they populated all day long with information that I don't have time to go grab myself. So it's a community. It's a give and take. It's a purest expression of the division of labor. You got 20 guys sitting in an office in a conference room at CIA or the Pentagon, dreaming up these ideas and writing white papers and then having them send them up to the generals who then implement the policy, versus a couple of million people just sitting back watching and waiting for the information to come out and go, no, that's wrong. No, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can't win. 20 people are not stronger than 1 million, 2 million. Here we are, chatty Catholics. Yes, you guys are. It's great. I mean, it's serious. I don't have to go out and do 90% of the research I used to do. You guys bring it to me. And it's very valuable. And it makes the community better. It makes the newsletter better. It makes my commentary better. Wish there was a way I could pay y'all. Not yet. Get this thing up to, 2 or 3 levels higher, and then, start talking about research. All right, so, but regardless of that. So about Yemen, just user 13 asks, and I'm really good at digressing. About Yemen, yeah, I think people are beginning to wake up to this. The rank hypocrisy of our stated goals in Syria for bombing Syria are directly orthogonal to what we're allowing and backing the Saudis to do in Yemen. So, but it's okay to do that in Yemen because because the Saudis are on our side. It's the same argument that we make about interfering in elections, right? I mean, and we've blatantly said this. Well, we're allowed to. Yeah, I think Heather Newart actually said this. We're allowed to go into and screw around in other people's elections because we're on the right side of history, because we're promoting democracy, because we're the good guys, because we're the goodies, and you're the baddies. So the baddies aren't allowed to attack the goodies, but the goodies are allowed to attack the baddies. And this is the way these people think. I mean, I might as well be hanging out in a friggin' 6th grade social studies classroom, for fuck's sake. It's crazy. But that's where we are. And that's literally the attitude of people who are crafting policy for us. User 13 reminds me that the U.S. itself used white phosphorus in Iraq. Yes, we did. As the Russians pointed out to us, who the hell are we to condemn anybody using chemical weapons when Syria has been certified by the U.S. to have gotten rid of all of its chemical weapons stores, and the U.S. has the biggest stockpile of chemical weapons in the world and is willing to use them. But because we're the indispensable unitary power bringing enlightenment to brown people around the world who we've bombed back to the Stone Age, it's okay to use them. It's okay for us to use them. We're going to use them responsibly because we're the goodies. Pull the other leg and play freaking Jingle Bells, for Christ's sake. All right. So don't forget that so Yemen is a catastrophe of epic proportions. It's horrible. Okay? And the fact that the Houthis are in there resisting all this, and you could say, well, the Iranians are backing them and they're doing this the same way that everybody accuses the Russians of backing the Donbass. No one wants to admit that maybe the Saudi military is just incompetent, and that the Ukrainian army is just incompetent, and that the people in the Donbass are fighting the Ukrainian army to a standstill with weapons that they stole. Because it's like, you want to buy an old Italian rifle, never been fired and only dropped once. It's the same thing with half the Ukrainian army over the last 3.5 years, 4 years. I mean, the Donbass has been armed by the people that they've beaten. Now, I'm not saying that Russia's not in there giving them support and help and all that other stuff. Of course they are. In some unofficial capacity, of course there are. Are there Russian mercenaries fighting in Ukraine? Of course there are. Are there Iranian mercenaries or Iranian-backed mercenaries in Yemen? Of course there are. Just like there's Mossad running around Yemen. Okay? Just like there's Mossad running around London. I mean, just like there's people running around everywhere. Everybody's doing bad shit. Everybody's doing bad things. There's no way around that. Let's not sit here and judge everybody from this, ridiculous white hat, black hat perspective. The tide of history is turning against these people, and they understand that this is the time that they have to go for the win, because if they don't, they're going to lose. I mean, dude, seriously, I watch this play out, and it's like playing a game. It's like playing a great area control game, like Diplomacy or Dune or something along those lines. And you're saying to yourself, the old Avalon Hill board game Dune, one of the great area control games of all time, because you just sit there and you go, okay, well, I have a window of opportunity. And you learn how to read geopolitics by playing games like this. Same thing in chess. Other people play chess. I play, weird board games. Fine. But you read the board state and you go, oh, that's what's going on. Okay, so this is obviously the scenario, given the totality of it, that the neocons in Washington and in Tel Aviv, hey, they have a very small window of opportunity here to achieve their ultimate goals, because the window is closing fast, because the world is coalescing around the opposite of what they want. China is finally getting off the fence as far as being a silent partner in the alliance to stop U.S. global control. Now, this is not to say that the Chinese and the Russians wouldn't be willing to cut a deal and create a multipolar world that where everybody wins. I'm not saying that multipolar world will look great either. I haven't gotten to that point yet. I'm just talking about what's happening right now. There's no hope that the existing power structure in the United States, France, the UK, Israel, that's going to change, that they're going to change their stripes. They have been on a path and a quest to control the entire world for hundreds of years. Why do you think they're going to change? Well, not the Israelis, obviously, but they and to be fair, I honestly think that the Israelis are going along with all of this. I mean, personally, I really do. That the Israelis are going along with all this, not because they believe in any of this stuff, because they think that that's the best way to ensure their survival. They're hitching their ride to the biggest and the baddest guy there. It's like, they don't necessarily may or may not even like what they're being dragged into. But some of them are. Some of them are ideologically aligned. Some of them are not. A lot of Israel is not. I've talked to Halsey about this. I've talked to multiple people who have contact within, with powerful people in Israel. And I know that that's not the case for the average Israeli or even most of the political parties in Israel. And so it's a very complicated issue, and I don't take this as Israel bashing or that I'm now cucking out or anything, because I've always felt this way. I've always talked about it this way. I don't think that it's I don't believe in the theory of the all-powerful Jew. I just never have. Just don't. Because I think it's silly, because there's multiple groups with aligned purposes, and the ultimate purpose is to build a bureaucratic and corporate web of overlapping interests that looks suspiciously like a one-world government superstate, transnational superstate, the open society, George Soros would like. Okay, so seriously, it's so there, but that window is closing, because every time the Russians stand up to the Americans, and the Americans eventually have to back off, is another moment where it inspires somebody else to do the same thing. The Syrians were dancing in the streets after the attacks the other day. Okay, they were dancing in the streets. Okay? It only emboldens them to stand up to the United States harder. It only emboldens Iran every time they deflect an attack. The big thing now, the worry now, is whether or not the United States is going to go so far, and if Nikki Haley got her way, this would be the case, to kick the Russians out of SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, otherwise known as the electronic network that liquefies the world. I mean, SWIFT is the means by which money moves across borders for the most part in the world today. The Russians have built their own variation on SWIFT in order to be able to process international payments from other people and whatnot. So if they get kicked out of SWIFT, it won't be as bad. When we kicked Iran out of SWIFT back in 2012, they were reduced to having to effectively barter. And don't ever forget, this is what I think is funny. People talk all the time like that Turkey and Iran are, they have a marriage of convenience or whatever. I'm like, no, they don't. seriously, Turkish banks were the ones laundering gold on behalf of the Iranians in order for the Iranians to sell oil between 2012 and 2015. Let's get down to brass tacks. There's a deep relationship between Erdogan and Iran. Now, it happens to be over the Kurds and Erdogan's hatred of the Kurds, which brings me to Erdogan, by the way. But, this is all, these alliances that are forming up now are not going to be broken through this kind of chest thumping by the United States, which is exactly what we had on Friday. There's still people in Washington who believe that, one, we can beat Russia in a war, and two, that we can put enough pressure on Russia to break their alliance with Iran and China. Now, why in God's green earth would the Russians believe a word that comes out of our mouth? Why? Would you? Do you really think that Putin is that dumb after having defied the United States and beaten them at every freaking game for the last 15 years? Remember, Putin is hated because he kicked the United States out of the Kremlin. Okay? Now, he's still got work to do in cleaning the place up, and we keep putting pressure on individuals. That's what all these sanctions are about, putting pressure on individuals to try and get him to soften his tone. He's not going to. He doesn't need to. He's winning. Silly, honestly. So these alliances are not going to change. They're only going to harden. They're only going to get tighter and stronger. All of Syria at this point is about destabilizing Iran and scuttling OBOR, the One Belt, One Road project of China. It's about, which is itself a direct threat to the Brzezinski/Wolfowitz doctrine of Central Asian chaos. None of that has changed. Policy has not changed at all. Presidents change, policies don't. Let's say it again. Presidents change, policy doesn't. Okay? So Erdogan this morning called for early elections. The French Macron, the boy toy, the soy boy, was out there touting how important he is because he's like angling to become president of the EU or president of Europe. Because he knows that Angela Merkel's time is done. He knows also that Germany's politics are pushing them out of the orbit of the globalists at the EU and towards Russia because of every imperative imaginable for Germany. And I said this in the second issue of my newsletter that I wrote for Newsmax back in 2013. Okay? 2013, 5 years ago, I said Merkel was in the middle. Just going to be pushed and pulled apart. Because Germany's best chance at surviving the future is economic integration with Russia. Now, with Macron out there trying to cast shade on everything and pump himself up, which is just laughable to me. He's out there saying, oh, well, we've been able to put it, through my diplomacy, I've been able to drive a wedge between Turkey and Iran. And Erdogan's like, no, you haven't. Oh, by the way, I'm going to call for early elections so that I can solidify power. And then tell the EU to go, take a flying leap. Okay? Seriously. And FYI, I was on Zero Hedge this morning. That hit, and the Turkish lira finally stopped blowing up. The Turkish stock market finally caught a bounce. Blah, blah, blah. We'll see if it's technically significant. I'll go over that. Probably not in a. Probably go over that in a private blog post. Patrons over. Because that's the kind of thing. No, that's the kind of thing. So, and I'm not gonna. I don't mince words. Because Turkey is very important, and we discussed this 3 months ago in the newsletter. Yeah. 3 months ago. Just Turkey and where they are and why they're so. So the alliance is not going to change here. Turkey is going to be out of NATO, or they're going to get kicked out of NATO. They're going to continue to put pressure on the U.S. Kurdish alliance in Eastern. Erdogan has no love for Assad because Erdogan likes to speak out of both sides of his mouth, just in case the U.S. decides to win, just in case somehow the U.S. is able to pull a victory out of the jaws of defeat. Possible, not probable. So Erdogan always keeps his options open. All that stuff ever means. All it ever means. But watch Erdogan's moves, watch his actions, not his words. His words all say that he's pushing into a complete alliance with the Russians, the Chinese, and the big question is going to be, the big question in the long term is going to be India, but we'll get to that later. We'll get that into another. So yeah, in conclusion, because I'm going to go soon. In conclusion, the point here is that with the Trump White House in flux, because his staff is ideologically misaligned with him, we're going to continue to see policy uncertainty come out of the White House. North Korea is pushing for peace, but it's the Koreans that are pushing this forward. I said this last month, and I'll continue to say it. The North Koreans are pushing forward. Now the U.S. is trying to piggyback on and say, well, we sent Pompeo over there last week to this, and we're having all these high-level talks and in preparation for the meeting, and that's all well and good, but the truth of the matter is that the Koreans are the ones that push this ball forward, and the U.S. is responding. And so we're trying to get control of the narrative so that we can remain, and Trump can remain, a vital part of this discussion when honestly everything is kind of moving forward anyway. Okay, and that's the important part. That's really the big take. The Koreans want unification. They want the United States gone. Shinzo Abe is here in the United States talking with Trump. He's under fire from a number of angles in order to try and get him to not go off the reservation and push for constitutional reforms. So again, so much going on. And so when you look at all of these things that are happening, you know, Abe wants to end the standoff over the Kuril Islands with Russia, right? He wants to do that. The U.S. won't let him. Okay? The Koreans want reunification, but the Americans really are standing in their way. Everybody wants Syria to be dealt with, and the United States and Israel and the Saudi Arabians don't want that to happen. Qatar is out. Qatar has made their peace. They bought a stake in Rosneft. They've cut deals with Iran to develop the North Pars gas field and build a pipeline into Turkey. They're done. They're fine. They survived MBS's attack on them, Mohammed bin Salman's attack on them. They're moving forward as an independent. Qatar survived. I think it's a very interesting thing. I'm not crazy about Qatar. I mean, those guys are scumbags, but they have survived and they got themselves out of a very bad situation. And they're no longer backing Al Qaeda in Syria. So, you know, take the win. You don't have to like them, but take the win. All right, guys. I think that's enough geopolitics for today. So, again, if you like what you heard today, I would appreciate hitting the subscribe button. Definitely hit the like button, because that definitely helps for me to find new subscribers. The other thing you can do is you can go into your notifications for when I go live, so that you can be here live to be a part of the stream. You got to go into your notifications and turn always notify when I go live on. So if you would do that, for those of you who are subscribed, if you would do that, that would be great. Also, any support through my work, either through Patreon or Steam or my blog directly. I take donations and cryptos over at my blog over at goldgoatsmith.com. All of those things would be appreciated. So you guys have a great morning. We'll talk soon. It's Wednesday. I'll probably be back on either tomorrow or Friday morning. You guys take care. You have a great afternoon, and keep your stick on the ice.